By the way, I just found out that Trump just fired the two Democrats on the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
Ooh, maybe
One
I
of
should
whom
add
is
that to my.
one of whom is EJ's wife, Mary.
All right, we are here. It is the Prospect Weekly Roundup. Harold was just giving me some information. Harold Meyerson, editor at large, was just telling me that just now we're going to break some news that Donald Trump has fired the two Democratic members of the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Now, is that a five-member independent commission along the lines of the Federal Trade Commission or the National Labor Relations Board or things like
I
that?
believe it is. I believe it is. And also this is not exactly uh, a controversial commission. Pretty much, it has been pretty much established fact that most people are relatively happy with an agency that checks out the safety of consumer products.
Yeah,
And
we generally like our toasters to not blow up in
exactly,
America.
exactly, or a microwave that, whatever. Yeah. So this is
But this is part and parcel with two things. One is the testing of the waters of the ability to fire um, appointees who heretofore were allowed to, you know, finish out their terms. And it's a challenge to close to 100-year-old Supreme Court precedent called Humphrey's Executor,
it is
which
100 years old. Yes,
it's not,
1935.
it's actually 90 years old, but
Oh, that's right.
uh,
I can't
yeah,
subtract.
fun with math. But they're attempting to use this so that they can, basically increase the hold of executive power on independent agencies. It's kind of interesting during the first term. Probably Trump's best appointee was Rohit Chopra because he appointed, as is custom, Democratic minority commissioners to federal independent agencies that have five-member panels where three of the members can be from the majority party, but no more. So Chopra was an appointee of Donald Trump, and at the FTC, he kind of revolutionized it from the minority and did a lot of changes, including just by using the dissent privilege. And obviously Rohit's very smart and very sharp. And the fact that we had a Facebook the Facebook case that is underway right now is in large part due to the fact that Rohit Chopra was pushing for it at the commission.
And
But
there,
I think we would expect zero Democratic appointees on any of these commissions to replace all of these people that he's been firing. And, he's looking for a rewrite of the statute to say that, right now, the FTC statute and many of the others say that you are not allowed to fire anyone at this commission unless you have cause. And these people are not just being fired for cause in any way. So that's one part of it. And the other part, at least at the CPSC, Consumer Product Safety Commission, is a general desire to end consumer protections in this country. We've seen the hobbling of the CFPB, which has one director, but that director in an acting capacity is Russ Vought, who's the head of the Office Management Budget, and he's been completely sandbagging the entire agency. We've seen this kind of across the government, that consumer protection, consumers, you're on your own.
right. And again, I think uh, for the most basic self-interest reasons, Americans have not viewed the Consumer Product Safety Commission as in any way controversial. Producers
Yeah,
of
I don't think it came up in the campaign.
right, producers
Who is
of
your CPSC nominee going to be, or are you going to, obliterate the agency?
right.
So absolutely, yeah, that's interesting stuff. Um, Well, it's not what we were going to talk about today here at the
Right.
Weekly Roundup. Welcome. It's David Day and Harold
This is
Meyerson.
yeah, this is the hourly roundup.
Yeah,
This
well,
is the
sometimes you
breaking
need that.
news.
You
Right.
need that with Donald Trump. Um, if we were here yesterday, the breaking news right around this time would have not been coming from the United States, but from a chimney at the Vatican, where the white smoke went through and the conclave was successfully concluded for the new Pope. Now, here we are, two Jews talking about the Pope. We don't
Who
have
better?
we don't have a Rabbi Sheki the Eighth to discuss. So here we are talking about Pope Leo, and the reason why I think you've been interested in this is the fact that this is someone of American origin for the first time in history. Why don't you give us your thought?
Well, this is certainly the first pope who apparently goes by Bob. Uh, it's what he wants people up until now. That's what wanted people to call him, Pope Bob.
There's no Pope Bob, so it's
Right, right.
he had to go with
Uh,
Leo.
yes, he's an American Chicago born, to quote Saul Bellow, and he's also global. He is literally a citizen both of the United States, where he is still voting in elections, and Peru, where I can only presume he probably votes in elections there. But he won the most surprising election of his career in the earlier this week and clearly brings to the papacy some of the attributes of his predecessor, Pope Francis. Certainly, very strongly, we now know in his affirmation of the rights of immigrants and his retweeting criticisms of J.D. Vance's sense that Catholicism is compatible with a kind of exclusionary nationalism, and even retweeted a protest of the Trump administration's deportation of Abrego Garcia to El Salvador. So, in this regard, in any event, he is clearly following, if not even possibly exceeding, Pope Francis's papacy long defense of immigrants and immigration, which makes a lot of sense, even particularly for an American Roman Catholic cleric, since traditionally the Catholic Church in our country arose really with both its clergy and its laity comprised of immigrants who were badly treated, initially the Irish, then the Italians, and then Mexicans and others from Latin America. So in many ways, for all of its shortcomings, the church in the United States has historically been a kind of immigrant's church. And that's one of the interesting complexities I think we see here. The other, which the New York Times is now writing about, is that Pope Leo has, at least the grandparent level, Creole ancestry, which is to say he is both binational, biracial,
Yeah.
not bisexual, but to the best of our knowledge, but certainly brings an interesting and unusual background in that regard.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why the speculation has emerged on why he was selected is that Pope Francis put him in a very powerful position. He was, I believe, the person who selected bishops to become cardinals, if
Right.
that's correct.
That is correct.
And
And
yeah,
he
go
had a
ahead.
committee that worked with him on that, and he included three women on that committee, which is also uh, groundbreaking. That's not to say that there's any indication he would support making women priests. We may have to, if people are waiting for that, they may have to wait another millennium at the rate at
Right,
which church doctrine eventually changes.
right.
But yeah, he was. he was really put in, in a sort of sense, the key traffic cop position of who gets the green light to be a bishop and who doesn't, and therefore becomes a known quantity to, among others, the College of Cardinals.
Yeah. And so, we now have consecutive popes from this hemisphere, and we have consecutive popes who seem to have a more liberal conception of the church's role in the world. I think that's fair to say.
It is.
But what's interesting is that it comes at a time when the center of gravity in the Catholic Church, as I understand it, is really shifting more toward Africa and not the South America or North America necessarily. And at a time when, at least over the last decade, the general global political culture has shifted more to the right. And so the church on both fronts is kind of riding against the global winds, as it were, although maybe they're due to shift back.
Right. Well, there are complexities with what we know, which isn't a heck of a lot of Leo's positions on some of Francis's, for lack of a better term, culture war issues. He clearly was not going where Francis was going to go when in 2012 he made some statements that didn't appear to be in line with what eventually became Pope Francis's policy of extending blessings to gay, lesbian couples and
Mm-hmm.
such. But of course, that was even, I think, that's the last thing we've heard out of Pope Leo on this, and that was even in the waning days of Pope Benedict's papacy when he made that. In other words, we haven't heard, to the best of my knowledge, anything from him on this in the past 13 years. He's a bit of somewhat of an unknown quantity. That may have made him more actually acceptable to the College of Cardinals, which they more or less concluded that he was in line with Pope Francis on sort of the pastoral side of the church. He was in line with Pope Francis on the defense of immigrants and advocacy for the poor, and he wasn't really quite as out there as Francis on the who am I to judge gays and lesbians, etc. sort of issues. So that might have be the reason he was able to get a two-thirds vote, which is what it takes to be elevated to the papacy.
Right. Well, it's interesting and something that obviously has global importance and briefly kicked Donald Trump off the front pages in
That's a
parts of
major
the world.
achievement for which we have to be grateful in and of itself. I will say one other thing. His choice of names, Pope Leo, and I'm going to get into this in further stuff I'm writing, is particularly interesting since his immediate Leo predecessor, Leo the 13th, was Pope from the 1870s to the very beginning of the 20th century, and therefore the first Pope who really presided over a period in which capitalism became what
Hmm.
we recognize today as capitalism, with large corporations employing lots of people, and therefore he became the first pope to defend things like unionization and worker rights. I think his choice of that, while explicitly opposing socialism, although I would argue that coming out of what Leo the 13th wrote, you can kind of see the beginning of coalition, social democratic, Christian democratic coalition governments, which I guess we now have in Germany. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting tradition and an important tradition for the new pope to have aligned himself with.
All right. Let's move from that to what we're seeing here
Right.
in the U.S. and particularly in Washington, where the spotlight really hasn't been on Congress in the first few months of Donald Trump's term. I believe he has signed 5 bills
As
in the first
yes,
100 days, a
as
shockingly low amount.
yes, I just want to make this point as distinct, because people compared his first 100 days. The only sort of template we have for first 100 days, of course, has been Franklin Roosevelt's, who was as busy, if not more so, than Donald Trump in his first 100 days. But Roosevelt worked through Congress, and he had signed 78 bills, including
Yeah.
depositor insurance, union rights, and relief measures.
Right.
Uh,
We've
you
got
know,
we've got 5, and 3 of them are canceling discrete regulations through the Congressional Review Act, whose time for expedited procedures in the Senate is expired. So you can't actually do anymore. There are 5 others that have been sort of held back that have been passed both houses of Congress. So we are going to see more bills there. But that's a special procedure that's really only used at the beginning of the Congress because you can get an up or down vote on it. The only other 2 bills are the Lake and Riley Act, which passed before Trump was even inaugurated, and the continuing resolution to fund the government, which, if you don't do, there's a government shutdown. So this is a real paucity of activity, but it is preparatory to what Trump apparently is wedded to calling the one big beautiful bill, which is essentially the entire Trump agenda, and something that in past years, although we've moved towards this reality because of the filibuster, where everything gets into single bills. But you can imagine a world where the filibuster wasn't such a hindrance, where there would be about 100 bills that would be put that you could pull from this package, which is they're trying to do in one. So let's break down what they're trying to do here. The Trump tax cuts expire at the end of this year. And there is a lot of desire on the part of Republicans to extend those Trump tax cuts permanently. The mechanism they've now hit on to do that is to say, well, if you use a current policy baseline, since we're already in the world of the Trump tax cuts, it will cost $0 to simply extend them beyond the part at which they expire. And that's literally what they're thinking about doing. I don't think there had been confirmation on that yet, because the Senate parliamentarian might say you're not allowed to do that, but and then they might overrule the parliamentarian, but it's a whole mess. But that's not the only stuff that they want to stuff into this bill. So there's the Trump tax cut extension. There are all the other tax cuts that Trump talked about on the campaign trail. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security benefits, no tax on auto loans for interest on auto loans for American-made cars, and a number of other tax issues that they want to stuff into this bill, offset by a huge number of spending cuts that they want to put into this bill. The biggest are on the program of Medicaid, which I scooped this week, what is actually being considered to put into that bill with the specific cuts involved. And the most surprising to me that was in there was a increase in what is called euphemistically cost sharing, and what that means is a premium or a copay or something where the patient is paying out of pocket. And they would do that in Medicaid for people making above 100% of the federal poverty level. And the federal poverty level for one person is $15,650. So that's, if you're working full time at $8 an hour, that's what you make. You make a little bit above that, and $8 an hour. And for a couple, it would be about $21,000. So a couple making $21,000 now would face premiums on Medicaid. There are actually no premiums on Medicaid for people in that category currently. And they would face higher copays and deductibles and all the sorts of things where the patient has to pay for this, these medical treatments under their insurance. And that does two things. Number one, it reduces, disposable income because you're paying for this. But the other thing it does, and probably more so for this population because it's so poor, if those people don't have the money to pay for a premium or a copay, they're either going to drop Medicaid and go naked in terms of insurance, or they won't utilize it because they can't afford the copay. So the goal here is to winnow the Medicaid rolls a little bit, and also winnow, what they euphemistically call utilization of healthcare for this population. So that's the main thing, but it's not the only thing that's in the Medicaid cuts, and there are a number of others. But I'm curious as to your reaction, whether it's on the policy or the politics of making poor people pay more for healthcare to finance tax cuts.
Yes, well, government takes lots of actions which, a lot of people, and I would add particularly people who don't follow the news that carefully, which is a disproportionately working class poor subset of the American public, having to have Medicaid recipients pay more will be noticed by Medicaid recipients. There's no way.
Of which we
Yeah,
should say there are 71 million in the United States,
exactly.
a large number of people.
And this has been a particular concern to Republican members of Congress who represent districts with a high percentage of Medicaid recipients. No one more so than the San Joaquin Valley's David Valadao, who
Right.
narrowly wins re-election over the last several election cycles, and more than 70%, I think, of the residents of his district are on Medicaid. And so the David Valadaos of this world, have to be in major distress. And, if
Well,
you
there's this
yes,
juggling match that they're
yes,
trying, right?
right,
Because Valadeo and other so-called moderate Republicans have said publicly, we're not going to cut benefits for
right.
Medicaid. This does that. I want to be clear. They have backed off of other ideas that would maybe more directly cut benefits. One was a so-called per capita cap, which would lower the federal share. Medicaid's a federal state program that would lower the federal share of spending on Medicaid and just give a cap on how much would go to the states. Another one was to cut the Medicaid expansion, which has a much higher share. 90% of the Medicaid expansion is picked up by the federal government relative to the federal state share in the rest of the program, which is between 50 and 70%. And the idea was to bring that down. Those were thrown out as ideas because the moderates revolted. But this is what's in the bill. And I think we're going to get a large number of moderates trying to gaslight us, saying that a cut in Medicaid is not actually a cut.
Yes, what I was saying was I'm not sure this gaslighting will work among
Yeah.
Medicaid recipients who suddenly find they have to pay more or they don't have enough to pay at all
Right.
under the new bill. And B, boy, does this hand the Democrats an issue.
Yeah.
This is an easy issue to characterize, and to characterize it fairly is, would be the same as demonizing it. There's no way you can describe it without
Right.
pointing out what it does and how
And
damaging it is.
so, absolutely. And so you would think that, okay, Republicans realizing this is very unpopular and that it's an existential moment for their moderates or their members in areas that have high numbers
Right,
of people on Medicaid, that they would just drop this. But the pressures from the other side, from the hardliners
right,
in the House caucus in particular, saying we are not going to vote for a bill that doesn't have severe cuts to Medicaid. Chip Roy came out this week and said he's kind of the ringleader of this
Right.
hardliner caucus. And he came out this week and said it is unfair to pay for the expansion at a higher percentage than to pay the rest of Medicaid out at. And so this is the tension here,
Yeah.
is that the moderates want to minimize these cuts and the hardliners want to maximize them. And typically what, who has won typically that political battle? It's been the hardliners in the
Right.
Republican caucus all year long. The moderates have kind of swallowed these things. They agreed to reconciliation instructions that said you have to get $880 billion out of things under the jurisdiction of the Energy and Commerce Committee. The Medicaid is the big one there. If you don't cut that in big ways, you can't get to 880. My reporting on this shows that they're not there. They're maybe at 500 billion, 400 billion, not at 880. They're also going to do a cut to the Affordable Care Act marketplace, going up the ladder. People may be more inclined to vote, by the way, who that would raise out-of-pocket expenses for millions of people on the Affordable Care Act exchanges. They're also going to cut back on welfare spending through temporary assistance for needy families and the social services block grant. And there are other things in the bill on Medicaid, like work requirements, for example. We have a question from Andrew Kalasi saying, what are the Medicaid cuts going to look like? Here are some of the other ones. In addition to that increase in out-of-pocket expenses for Medicaid recipients who make over $15,000 some dollars a year, work requirements are going to be imposed. 61% of people in Medicaid work. So this isn't about getting Medicaid recipients back to work. It's about making it harder to enroll and stay enrolled. Another thing they're going to cut is a Biden era rule called the eligibility and enrollment rule that was designed to make it easier to get onto Medicaid and to stay onto Medicaid. So instead of redeterminations, which is when they check your income again and make sure you're eligible, instead of those being every 12 months, they'll be every 6 months. So I was on MSNBC this week and I talked about this. The analogy I used was, in the days before the Affordable Care Act, some insurance companies would put their enrollment offices on the 7th floor with no elevator. And so anyone who had to get up there would have to walk up the steps. And if you were sick, you weren't getting up those steps and you weren't even bothering to get up those steps. And so the idea is that kept enrollment of sick people who might cost the insurance company money down. This is the same kind of thing. Make it harder to enroll, make it harder to be eligible, and that will cut the rolls. And in fact, the CBO report, Congressional Budget Office report this week, showed that just the eligibility and enrollment rule, repealing that, would cut 2.3 million people off the Medicaid rolls.
Medicaid was created like Medicare in 1965. And when it was created, there was a notion that, the poor were largely minorities and largely Democratic. And even if they weren't minorities, like the people who live in West Virginia, which is a heavily white state, well, they voted Democratic too. So it was very easy for Republicans to oppose Medicaid historically. However, over the subsequent 50 years since 1965, am I subtracting? No, 60 years. Over the subsequent 60 years, wages for working class Americans have stagnated. The number of people who have jobs that don't come with health insurance or who can't afford health insurance has grown. And so the Republicans' historic antipathy to Medicaid has run afoul of the changes we all know about to the American economy. And now there are a lot of Republicans and people in Republican-held districts who are Medicaid recipients as well, which makes life more uncomfortable for the Republican Party. And while you absolutely correctly diagnosed a Republican Party in the House with with people in frontline districts who are afraid of these cuts and hardliners who are insisting on these cuts. The other factor here is that the Republican, strength in the House is only two or three votes more than what the absolute minimum for a majority status is. And if they lose a few frontline districts and don't do better elsewhere, they suddenly go into the minority. So
Yeah.
this is why the Republicans are tying them, are desperately trying to come up with something. And I don't think they certainly have not achieved, as you just pointed
I,
out, anything
yeah.
resembling consensus or unanimity, or which, when you only have 220 votes, you need.
I want to bring up two other things that are in the Medicaid bill, and then we can talk about the rest of the package. Because these show, ways in which moderates can say we aren't cutting anything, but it is actually a cut. So the one example is the plan is to repeal what the Biden administration called the safe staffing rule. And the safe staffing rule mandates a certain number of nurses at skilled nursing facilities that care for nursing home patients who are largely on Medicaid. Medicaid is the only federal program that covers nursing home care, and there's this incredibly sad thing that happens where people spend down all of their
Right.
money so that they can qualify for Medicaid and then get into a nursing home. That really happens in America. So you look at this and you think, well, how is repealing the safe staffing rule going to save money for the federal government? Um, and it happens this way, and it's again the sort of euphemistic lower utilization part of this. If someone goes and looks to put their mother or grandmother into a nursing home, and they see that there's no one there on the job, that it's there are no standards that are put in by the federal government, and it's basically a warehouse for old people, you're probably going to say, I'm not going to put my mother or grandmother in there. And if enough people do that, then Medicaid isn't being used as much, and it is a net savings for the government. But that comes at the cost of a great cost to patients who simply aren't getting quality care anymore. So that's one kind of insidious way that this thing saves money. The other one is, I think you'll appreciate this. I think you have to call it a racket, and Republicans looking for money are actually looking to fix it, but there are some interesting implications. So there's this thing called the Medicare provider tax. This was in the New York Times this week, and my sources indicate that this is in the bill. The Medicare provider tax is something states do. Pretty much every state except Alaska does this. They charge a tax to their hospitals to pay for Medicaid, but then they increase the reimbursement share that goes back into those hospitals. So those hospitals are essentially held harmless. But what that does is it makes it look like Medicaid is more expensive, and therefore it triggers a higher share from the federal government that gives, as their portion of Medicaid. It looks like there's more spending on Medicaid, therefore there's more money coming from the feds into the states. So this is like this weird recycling of money that just generates more federal funds. So there are ways to cut that entirely, which would be absolutely drastic. And there are ways to limit the amount of a provider tax that a state can issue. And they've opted for the limiting part of this. But what's really interesting is that the states that would be most affected by this are red states. That's who uses this the most. They use this little recycling option. And what it means is that there's simply going to be less money available for Medicaid, right? I mean, this saves money by not giving as much money to the states. And therefore, the states have to come up with their own amounts in order to fund Medicaid. And what they probably will do is tighten eligibility and make sure that they don't have to pay anymore because they don't have that money. So this is another way where you reduce the Medicaid rolls without it looking like you're reducing the Medicaid rolls.
Right. Well, like I said, what Republicans see as political necessity is the mother of this kind of invention, and it's just bad news, not simply for the what Republicans viewed as the historic Democratic constituency or non-voters on Medicaid, but as you just pointed out, a lot of this disproportionately hits Republican states, and a lot of what they're doing even more generally. I mean, we didn't really think in the 1960s very much about routine rural poverty. Today, rural America is heavily politically red in the sense of Republican equals red, uh, and and it's been abandoned
Hmm.
by, excuse me, it's been abandoned by
Yeah.
American businesses, and so this strikes deep into Republican areas, very
Yeah,
deep.
absolutely. And okay, and by the way, there's a comment here from Stacey McConnell who says, for-profit healthcare is the root of the problem. Medicaid cuts will disproportionately affect nursing home patients. Nurse here. So I think that tells you what you need to know about that. And there are some other comments that we will get to. But I want to just wrap this up by mentioning that uh, the Medicaid stuff and this real tension between the hardliners, moderates, is not the only area of this bill where consensus is, shall we say, lacking. And a big one is how to deal with the state and local tax deduction. And that is something that is now capped at $10,000, and it affects people who take deductions, which are wealthy people in high tax states, New York, California specifically.
And New
There are
Jersey.
enough and New Jersey. And there are enough Republicans in those three states who really want that changed, who are unyielding to the demands of the House leadership. They have offered now a $30,000 cap, and those SALT caucus members are not taking that either. And because what they know is that if the Trump tax cuts expire, so does the cap on the state and local tax deduction. So they get everything they want by just not doing anything. And so that's created a tremendous amount of uncertainty around whether or not they can find anything that can pass Congress. And, there is emerging talk now that, well, what if we just take this to the end of the year and try to strike a deal with Democrats to extend some of the Trump tax cuts, if not all of them? I mean, they're already starting to talk about this. This is before the markups are even done in the House, and certainly they haven't even started them in the Senate. The Agriculture Committee part of this also has been kind of blown up because now the Agriculture Committee wants to add the entire farm bill into this one big beautiful bill, which is a very delicate process that often doesn't get done at all. And they want to add that. They want to put more money they want to add cost sharing by the states into the SNAP program, which is another anti-poverty program,
Right.
supplemental nutritional assistance, sometimes called food stamps. They want to force the states, much like the states have to pay for part of Medicaid, they want to force the states to pay for a part of food stamps, and the states are pushing back on that, especially the states that don't have the money to accommodate that. So we are seeing, what we've seen until now on this bill is deferring the hard questions. And now all the hard questions are with us. And Republicans are having a very hard time. They have no track record of governing. At least, when you look at the House for the last 2 years. And now they're trying to do all of these hard questions at once. And all on unpopular things like the Trump tax cuts, Medicaid cuts, and food stamp cuts, and things like that. It is a devilish kind of situation, and I don't know that there's an end game yet.
And with a delegation in the House that, as I said, is only two members above the minimum requirement for a majority. So you almost couldn't come up with uh, uh, a knottier conundrum or whatever for House Republicans than this. Getting a 218 on anything on this is, you know,
It's
is
hard to see.
already a
I don't see
struggle.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't see it. And at the beginning of the year, I said, I don't know that this bill's going to pass. And a lot of people kind of dismissed that. But we're seeing all these hard choices that have to be made. Now, I mean, I think you can find 218 for something on tax cuts,
Right.
right? If they dump the other portions of this, but the hardliners seem to be demanding spending cuts as tribute for it, and that's where the rubber meets the road. We have a question from Jared Bannickhead, who often checks in. Thank you, Jared, about the infrastructure bill. So, the surface transportation bill, as it will, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. As Jared mentions, most of the provisions run out next year because that's usually a 5-year bill, and that was passed in 2021. And the question is, given that Trump tried to make a huge infrastructure deal with Pelosi in 2018, will Trump put it on the GOP agenda this year? First of all, they can't even figure out the things that are expiring this year. They're not going to go ahead and try to figure out the things that are expiring next year. But, a surface transportation bill is going to be a very difficult thing for them to do in an election year in 2026. And especially with all of the cuts that are in the Trump budget, particularly to mass transit, it's going to be a real problem in the cities, particularly ones that rely on mass transit to manage themselves under what the federal share is likely to be. So no, I don't think that's going to be on the GOP agenda this year, and maybe it won't be next year. I don't know.
And here, the Republican, desire to make cuts to more Democratic constituencies comes into play since the users
Sure.
of mass transit are urban and often urban working class. So the people that the Republicans consider to be, God forbid, Democrats. So, I don't see much political incentive
Yeah,
from their
100%.
perspective.
All right. Let's shift gears a little bit from one side of the Congress to the other, from the House to the Senate, and I'm gonna try very hard to explain crypto to you, Harold. We'll see how far I get,
Well,
but I don't think you have to know much. Go ahead.
I understand scams, so that's probably
That's what I was
90%.
going to say.
That's
You don't
probably
have to know much.
90% of understanding crypto.
You don't have to know much about crypto to understand what is going on
Right.
in America right now, because Donald Trump has created a crypto empire. Donald Trump, being someone who understands, I think, innately the nature and the possibility of grifting, and when he got into politics, realized how much opportunity there was to make money off of the people who are now his supporters. And we are seeing this on an absolutely massive scale. And he also understood that he could use his power and influence as a self enrichment enterprise, not just in America, but around the world. And so here's what we're seeing. So Trump has several crypto companies, and his organization is his family, the Trump Organization. One is called World Liberty Financial. He has issued a coin called the Trump coin, which is a digital asset that rises and falls based on hype. And he has created this thing where there is a ticket available to a special dinner with the president if you are one of the top 220 people in terms of having the most Trump coins. So, I mean, think about this, right? You're selling access to the president based on how much of these coins you buy, and every time you buy a coin, it enriches the president because it raises the value of these coins overall. 80% of which are owned by the Trump administration, the Trump Organization. So that's one of the grifts. The second one is that he issued this thing called a stable coin called USD1. And a stable coin is basically a money market fund. It's something that's pegged to the dollar, and you can use it to trade, usually trade crypto. As soon as he did this, and by the way, on that Trump coin thing, 70% or something like that of the top 220 on the leaderboard are foreign nationals, right? Similarly, with this USD1, which is
Right.
cleverly called that to make it sound like it's the US dollar, right? Um, uh, the there was a conference in the United Arab Emirates,
Right.
and a Dubai company said they are going to make a $2 billion investment in a crypto exchange called Binance, and they're going to use USD1 to make that investment. So every time they purchase $2 billion in stablecoins, that also enriches the Trump organization. So just using this as a standard of payment is a self-enrichment device, and we're seeing foreign countries and foreign nationals figure that out. So that's kind of the lay of the land, and that's just two of many. And we actually have a very big piece coming out about all of this pretty soon in our next print issue by Jacob Silverman, who's a great chronicler of crypto. So you have what is, unparalleled corruption, the ability for anyone in a foreign country to make payments and purchase a meme coin of Trump's, or to purchase a stable coin, and to just sort of let it be known that we're doing this and therefore win the favor of the president. It's an absolutely outrageous form of corruption, right? At the same time, the Senate is trying to pass a bill that gives a regulatory imprimatur to stablecoins. It's called the Genius Act. And yeah, well, exactly. Your head should shake at that. And Democrats have been, all along the way collaborating with Republicans to pass this bill. And until these Trump stories started circulating, it looked like it was going to get about 70 votes in the Senate. Two of the co-sponsors are Democrats, Kirsten Gillibrand, who is also the head of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. And certainly, probably given how much money the crypto industry put into the 2024 elections, is certainly thinking about that as she stewards the 2026 elections. And the other co-sponsor is a Democrat named Angela Also Brooks, who's a senator first term from Maryland. So all of this was sort of happening in parallel, but the Trump corruption kind of became too much to ignore. And Democrats who were pro-crypto generally were looking for a way, they recognize the bad optics of blessing stablecoins when Trump is doing corruption and with stablecoins, right? So they decided, oh, well, we need more changes to the bill. And there were these round-the-clock talks looking for changes to the bill. And at the same time, they hit on, other members were introducing bills to say, well, no president should be able to issue a stable coin, or no president should be able to issue any kind of coin and facilitate corruption in this manner. So there's a bill called the End Crypto Corruption Act that Jeff Merkley put together that says you're not allowed, if you're a president or the president's family or a senior White House executive, or senior executive branch official, or even a member of Congress, you can't issue a digital asset. So then what happened is Democrats and Republicans made this kind of bargain. And the bargain is, give us an amendment on the End Crypto Corruption Act to this stablecoin bill. That amendment will fail because no Republican is going to rip Trump's crypto empire away from him. And we'll pass the bill after we try to get that amendment passed. So that was kind of the deal that was set. Now, yesterday, Republicans decided to go ahead with a test vote on the Genius Act anyway, even though they didn't have any of the language from the cosmetic changes that they agreed to with Democrats. And Democrats were too embarrassed to vote for a bill with no language. So they decided that we're not going to vote for that. But this is going to come up next week, very likely. And this kind of corrupt bargain that I just described, where they get an amendment, but it's not really, it's not material, it's designed to fail. It goes forward, and then the Genius Act is passed. So, end of
Yeah, well,
sentence.
this all is sort of the reductio ad absurdum also of the laws on campaign finance. The reason that the Democrats really don't want to offend the crypto companies is that those crypto companies donated hugely in the 2024 election, most prominently to the challenger Bernie Moreno, who defeated Sherrod Brown in Ohio for that Senate seat, and
Also, the defeat of John Tester, too,
John
in
Tester in
Montana.
Montana, the two swing seats that the Democrats lost in the
Yeah.
2024 election. So, the Democrats kind of view crypto as either a potential ally or the Grim Reaper. And that's,
Correct.
that's why you see them caving, for lack of a better word,
Well, there's
on
no doubt. This
requesting.
this is a money
Yeah,
and politics issue. You're
yeah,
absolutely right,
yeah,
Harold.
yeah.
So, and the aspect of Trump's activity in crypto briefly derailed what was a full-on purchase of Washington by the crypto industry,
Exactly.
but it
Yeah.
appears to be only a brief bump in the road.
Yeah,
Is
but this
is
is
the
this
point?
is almost this is, the 21st century version of railroads buying state legislatures out of hand to get government land to build their rails for free and to ensure there'd be no regulations on or even supervision if there's any law breaking on their part. This
Indeed,
is
and
the
that's the
21st.
point.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the point, and it's not really that hard to explain. And I think there is, especially with what Trump has done, there is an ability for a backlash here that just talks about this as a corruption issue. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously, you have to have the financial backing to do that, but it'll be interesting to see if there, as we head into elections, whether at the end of this year or next year, whether that becomes, something that is part of the menu.
Well,
I'm not sure it will be.
yeah, but if a Democratic consultant can craft an ad saying this is why you have to pay more just to be even on Medicaid, the ad about Trump prostrating himself to Dubai or whatever is certainly an empirically verifiable topic for an ad as well.
Yes, absolutely. So we just have a few minutes left, and there were a couple questions. One was about FAA funding in the infrastructure bill, and I think I'm going to have to beg ignorance on that, Judith Pierre. Not sure where we're at, although I am very alarmed about what is happening at Newark Airport on seemingly a daily basis,
Yeah.
especially because I have a flight into Newark Airport in June. So it has not made me exactly comfortable with the state of the Federal Aviation
So does
Administration.
my
So
daughter,
that's all
who's
I can say.
flying from the Bay Area to Newark in at the end of May and was trying to change a ticket to Philadelphia instead of Newark.
Yeah, that might be a good idea. I might have to look into that. But there's one other question. Maybe we'll end with this, and it's from Chris Pantocrator, who says, "Do you see any concrete pro-government movement or platform yet? I hope the prospect plays a similar role to your day one agenda. Rebuilding feels gigantically difficult right now." I mean, I agree. What I have said over the last couple months, and curious for your thoughts, Harold, is that the fault lines in Democratic politics right now really aren't necessarily ideological. They aren't really about agenda building at this point. They're about whether you're going to stand up and try to fight the Trump administration or not, and use the tools of your power that are available to you, limited though they may be, to effectuate that. What do you think, Harold, about
Well, when you see
that?
J.B. Pritzker making a speech that sounds like it was written by Bernie Sanders,
Right,
no, I think this is right, and I think J.B. Pritzker is nothing if not a smart Pol, and he understands that the Democrats are demanding an unparalleled level of resistance and of activism and of anything, given all the constraints, since the Republicans have a trifecta control of the federal government, given all those constraints, are you doing the max? There remain some who counsel a more cautious course, or who insist the Democrats need to repudiate some of their culture war
yeah,
positions. But I think that, I think the fault line right now, the other fault lines haven't gone away, but the
correct.
fault could lead, the fault that's dealing with the 9 on the Richter scale earthquake here is the fault on where are you during this, what did you do in this war, daddy,
Right.
mommy, etc.
So I think, yeah, that's the political reality. And there are things that aren't dissimilar to the day one agenda in terms of things that can be done with the power that Democrats have that are out there. And we've actually written about it one this week, a great piece from Todd Phillips that I would commend to you about using the Congressional Review Act, but sort of in reverse, by Democrats to challenge Trump administration actions, which, that whole thing could be widened because this gets a little complicated at the end of the show. But there's an attempt to roll back the waiver that the EPA granted to California on tailpipe emissions on vehicles. And that technically isn't a rule that should be up for review under the Congressional Review Act, which allows Congress to nullify certain regulations. But Republicans seem to be wanting to do it anyway. And if they do so, there is opportunity there for Democrats then to challenge every single thing that the government does on a daily basis. And because of the methods of the Congressional Review Act, you can get a vote on that simply by having 30 senators, and it supersedes everything else that you do in the Senate. And so you can essentially hold the floor indefinitely because there's hours of debate that are attached to that. You could do it every day until between now and the end of the session, especially if it's all actions, not just specific regulations, as mentioned under the statute. So gumming up the works,
Yeah,
holding floor time, those kinds of things are the things you can do if you're really truly interested in stopping some of these Trump administration actions.
and which is to say, if you open the door on process in either house of Congress, Democrats are gonna come through it just as you are. So that's
Right.
where we're at.
So, I mean, that's an example. As far as, going forward after that, I do think the prospect will play a role in, making sure that the stakes are understood of what can be done in the future. Obviously, we're going to be rebuilding out of a very deep hole, but the opportunities are still there. The laws that exist are still on the books. And now Republicans have given a roadmap to how to kind of knuckle down the courts. Right? They're talking about, let's pass a bill to cancel nationwide injunctions. I think Democrats would be like, yay, that would be great, because so many rules from the Biden administration were stopped because of one right wing court in North Texas, just issuing rules for the entire country. So here we go. That sounds good to me.
That's
Let's reintroduce that bill.
that's the problem of the open door. Yes, you
Indeed.
yes.
All right, we are out of time. Harold Myerson, editor at large, thank you very much for being here. I should say that I am going on a vacation for a couple weeks, so I will not be here on the Roundup next week or the week after that. I believe Ryan Cooper will be your guide, and he'll have some great guests for you. But I will be back after Memorial Day. uh, uh, be well, enjoy, and we do this every Friday, 12:30 Eastern. We put the video up on the website. Tell your friends. YouTube.com/American Prospect is our YouTube channel. Sign up, join thousands of others, and thank you as always for being here. And have a great rest of your day.
And have a great weekend.
That's right.